Federal prosecutors in Minneapolis and across this country are now threatening mass resignations within the DOJ, and also FBI agents are threatening mass resignations. One question I have is how many more people practically can resign because the Department of Justice and the FBI have lost so many people, so many senior leaders, mid-level leaders, and workers there in general, from staffers to senior attorneys to paralegals to top agents, just across the board. We've already seen a mass exodus, and I'm talking thousands of agents, thousands of lawyers have already left. But now, since the Department of Justice's disgusting handling of things like the Epstein files and the ongoing cover-up, the way they've weaponized it and gone after people like Don Lemon, which the Los Angeles DOJ office doesn't want to touch, the Minneapolis Department of Justice Federal Prosecutor's Office does not want to touch, the way they've responded post-murder of Alex Pretty and Renee Nicole Good, people who were just trying to cling on because they really needed the job and they were just hoping they could keep their heads down. They're really saying at this point, we can't do it. And so at a press conference on Friday, Todd Blanche, Donald Trump's former criminal defense attorney turned number 2 at the Department of Justice, he's the deputy AG. He was asked, so what do you make about already the significant resignations within the federal prosecutor's office in Minneapolis, the civil rights division in DC, and the threats of additional mass resignations? Let's watch Todd Blanche's response. Let's play it.
Merit the same kind of investigation.
Do you have comment on the career prosecutors that are resigning in Minneapolis?
No answer. No answer. A typical Trumpian Todd Blanche answer. And meanwhile, they had DEA agents stalking the home of Georgia Fort, a award-winning journalist with the National Association of Black Journalists who was with Don Lemon videotaping at that church in St. Paul. I mean, look at what it looked like outside of her house. She thought she was going to be kidnapped by these individuals. And with everything going on, she, like many others, didn't even believe they had a legitimate warrant to even be there in the first place. You have continuing people saying that they're going to be leaving these entities. I want to bring in Harry Litman from the Talking Feds YouTube channel, Talking Feds Substack, and Talking Feds podcast. Harry, it's great to see you. You and I now, for the better part of a year, we've been covering these mass resignations. Really, when the Trump regime's DOJ started down this path, which we all expected after the election they were going to do it, you and I have made covering this mass exodus a priority. As your shirt says, and our audio listeners can hear it, ex-Fed. And, you were a former top federal prosecutor in the Western District of Pennsylvania. You were a top federal prosecutor in the Department of Justice, Main Justice, Washington, D.C. So you speak to these former leaders at the DOJ, and you're part of groups that have leaders, and former leaders and senior people. The mood is beyond grim at this point at the DOJ. It is broken. I can't stress enough. And it ties into this, Harry, then I'm going to turn it over to you, which is, you have, George W. Bush appointed judge in Minneapolis, and we saw another judge say this in Minneapolis as well, that there have been more judicial orders that have been violated in January alone than in the history of any agency he's seen in their entire existence in the month of January alone. And look, I'm a law professor. You teach law, Harry. It used to be something I would tell the law students. I would say working at the DOJ is one of the greatest things you can do out of law school. Has some of the best students. It launches your career. I don't care if it was a Republican or Democratic administration, work at the DOJ because the career prosecutors, the system of bringing people up, it's like no other experience you can get. But now I warn people, I said, if you be very careful because you could have a stain on your career being attached to these cases, no matter what type of judge you appear before, a Bush, a Trump, a Obama, a Clinton, a Biden, because this current DOJ keeps violating court orders and they're dragging along the associates and the deputies who are there with them. Harry, break it all down for us.
Man, for unlike any other experience you can get, that is so true now. They are just transgressing. Everything is completely topsy-turvy. And you have, as you say, the career folks who are still there, they're the ones who have been hanging on, and they are just, completely distraught. How can we work for this way? Everything they've done in the last 24 hours has been over the vehement dissent of everybody in the career ranks. I can hardly remember when that's ever happened. And I'll tell you what else I can hardly. You're right. I've been in the field. I've been the U.S. attorney. I've been in Maine justice. Resignation is the ultimate kind of final gesture. And now it's not clear with all the Trump histrionics that people appreciate it. But when you had that out of the criminal section of the Civil Rights Division, when they just disabled them with the good case, and then Minnesota is already there. They were at half staff, but that understates it because they still have a civil division. They have hardly anybody left to prosecute, drugs and fraud and public, everything that the office does. The number one guy there, remember that he's number two in the office, but the most heralded prosecutor, he left when they were trying to, push him to say, well, don't look into Renee Good's murder. You should, however, look into the widow and whether she's a domestic terrorist. You mentioned what they did with Georgia Fort. How about this with Don Lemon? You never, ever have someone of his stature or credibility. If you're going to have an indictment, I'll get to that in a moment. They are always permitted, as was, for example, Donald Trump, to surrender by a summons. They're not going anywhere. Instead, they arrest him at 11 o'clock at night, cuff him, take him to jail, make him stay overnight. That's just a gratuitous kick in the teeth. And the very charges, Bondi made a big deal about claiming this is me and I gave the order, and we will get, I'm sure, into the indictment itself maybe when he returns to Minnesota. But the whole thing is completely, it's not just I disagree with your judgment. It is totally against the grain of what DOJ practices culture have always stood for. And if you look at that indictment, to give a quick preview, so much of it is standard journalistic activity. This case is going to crash and burn. They probably don't even care because, for Bondi, it's like a trifecta, right? It's connected to the immigration in Minneapolis. It's SCORE. It is having to do with religious practice, the terrible transgression of the rights of people who were in church, notwithstanding the long standing tradition of protests in just that setting. SCORE, and biggest score for her and Donald Trump, one of the real enemies who Trump can't despise is Don Lemon. So everybody told her, don't go there, don't go there. We would never go there. She could care less. She overrules everyone, and they come in and, treat him like a street criminal who's going to flee. These guys are just beyond any sort of shame. And it's like now, it's a cesspool, as you say, Ben. It's just getting deeper and broader. And, they already had in some of their reprisal prosecutions say what they're threatening in Walls and Fry in Minnesota and Powell. They're trying to basically enact policy by making trouble for people who oppose them. And now this is a case that I'm here to tell you would never have been green-lighted by any Department of Justice going back, to my lifetime. And what more proof do you need than everyone says don't do it, and Bondi does it and takes pride in it. So, we're really talking about a DOJ that's been completely set on its ear. And yeah, even the people who have hung in there, they thought maybe they were doing good. They really needed the job. They loved some aspects of the work where they were being let alone. They just can't take it anymore. And, resignations, I'll just close as I open. That's the loudest kind of protest a professional prosecutor can make. You heard about them over, history with the threats in the and a couple of them in the Saturday Night Massacre and Watergate, the big threat in 2000 that made Trump back down from his DOJ scheme. They don't really happen much at all. And they're just, and specifically done in protest for what this crowd is doing within the culture of DOJ. It's just apocalyptic.
Apocalyptic is putting it lightly, and
apocalyptic isn't putting it lightly. I thought about it for a while. I couldn't go deeper than apocalyptic, Ben, but if you have something that even gets more, go for it.
Well, I'll stick with it. Then I'll stick with apocalyptic.
All right.
But the reality is who's even working at the DOJ anymore? And I don't say this I'm not trying to be facetious here, is that who are the people working here? Like all the people who I knew who were smart lawyers, like they're gone. And I'm just trying to think of the people like literally doing the day-to-day work there. Yeah. And, you're seeing in these cases, again, deadlines missed, declarations not being followed, the basic blocking and tackling of moving a case forward, the DOJ doesn't have the resources for. In the SDNY, for example, there's a big sex trafficking trial with these defendants who are these real estate brothers from Miami, and they're set to go to trial. And the DOJ SDNY is complaining to the judge that they don't have the resources right now to prosecute the two individuals who have been accused of very serious things, because they say they've been so focused on going through the Epstein files that they're not prepared. And the federal judge is like, What do you mean you're not prepared? You're the SDNY. What do you mean you're not ready to go to trial? And then the defense attorneys, who are usually the ones who are trying to say, hey, we need more time. The defense attorneys are saying, Judge, we need to go. Let's do this trial. What are we talking about? It's such a strange thing to see. And I'm not even the corruption, the apocalyptic stuff. Yes. Then just the basic, like the deadline is this, they miss it. You have to file by this date, you miss it. Here's how you file a declaration. They don't know how to file the declaration. So it's stuff like that, Harry.
Yeah, and it's a deeper impact, Ben. We've talked about the erosion of credibility and faith on the part of judges, and I think now the public about the DOJ, and how that has an impact ultimately on us and public safety. You want to talk about an impact on public safety? The feds still do only a small slice of crime, but they're very important crimes. They don't have the people there, the basic just bench warmers or whatever. They can't get. They're having trouble finding even qualified people, as you've suggested, who want to go in there. Minnesota now, they're probably does 300 cases, say, a year. They can't do a fraction of that now. And what does that mean for who is acting with impunity in Minnesota? What the FBI is not investigating, what's on the street, victimizing the public in a way there would never be in just a modestly functional Department of Justice. This is a abject breakdown, and for the most rank, politicized, nasty reasons that are the antithesis. I don't know if this will do you better than apocalyptic, but it is everything about this is the antithesis of justice without fear or favor. It's all about how can we screw Trump's enemies and further his agenda. That's in Fulton County as well, in lieu of doing other things. People leave, people are reassigned to it, and there is a total gap in the public safety and justice function of the Department of Justice, as it used to be called.
Everybody, make sure you hit subscribe here, but more importantly, subscribe to the Talking Feds YouTube channel, the Talking Feds Substack, and the Talking Feds podcast. Thanks, Harry.
Hey, thanks, Ben.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.